My grandmother's hands were always cold, even in the middle of August. When the rest of us were sweating through our clothes at the lake house in Muskoka, her fingers felt like she'd just come in from shoveling the driveway. She used to press them against my cheeks when I was little and laugh at the face I made. I used to pretend it bothered me more than it did. Just to hear her laugh. She died on a Tuesday in late October. The maple in her front yard had gone completely red. And when the hospice nurse called me, I was standing at my kitchen window in Ottawa watching leaves fall into the backyard. I remember thinking she would have liked that. She always said autumn was the most honest season. Everything showing exactly what it was before it let go. I'm telling you this because you need to understand what my grandmother meant to me before I tell you what my brother did at her will reading. And I need you to understand what I do for a living before you understand why it didn't work. My name is Claire. I'm 31 years old. I work as a forensic document examiner for the federal government. I've spent the last 6 years analyzing signatures, identifying altered contracts, and testifying in court about whether a document is what someone claims it is. I've helped put people away for fraud. I've unraveled estate schemes that took families years to construct. I know exactly what a forged document looks like under a VSC, a video spectral comparator, and I know exactly what it looks like on paper when someone thinks they've been careful enough. My brother, Daniel, is 35. He sells commercial real estate in Toronto. He has a very nice watch, a very expensive truck, and a very serious problem with spending more than he earns. He's been that way since we were teenagers, always reaching for something just slightly beyond what he could honestly afford. My parents thought it was ambition. I always thought it was something else. Our grandmother, Nana Ruth, raised us more than our parents did. My mother and father divorced when I was 7, and Daniel was 11. And both of them spent the years that followed being largely unavailable in the specific way that adults sometimes are when they are too busy rebuilding their own lives to notice the children still standing in the rubble. Nana Ruth lived 20 minutes from the house we grew up in. She came to every school play. She drove us to hockey and swimming lessons. She let us stay every weekend and made pancakes shaped like animals that never quite looked like what she said they were supposed to be. When I was in university, she quietly told me she had set aside money for me. Not a fortune, but enough. She had a small investment account she'd been contributing to for years, built from the sale of the Muskoka property after my grandfather died. Some savings, some careful decisions made with a financial advisor she trusted. She told me she had a will, that everything was written down, and that she wanted me to know I would be taken care of. She said the same to Daniel, though I didn't know the exact details of what she'd told him. After she died, Daniel called me the same night the hospice nurse did. He cried on the phone. We both did. He said we should get through the arrangements together, and I agreed. He seemed like my brother again. The way he sometimes did when something real happened, when the watch and the truck fell away, and he was just a person who had lost someone he loved. The funeral was in November. It was a proper Canadian November. Gray and close. The kind of cold that doesn't announce itself with wind, but just settles in. The church was full. Nana Ruth had lived in the same neighborhood in Oakville for 40 years, and she had outlasted almost everyone who had ever tried to leave. Neighbors came. Old friends. 3 women from her book club who all cried harder than anyone. Daniel and I sat together at the front. My mother came, which surprised me. My father sent flowers and an apology for a prior commitment, which did not. 2 weeks after the funeral, the estate lawyer's office called to schedule the will reading. Her name was Margaret Oze, and her office was on Lakeshore in Oakville, the kind of quiet firm that has been in the same building for decades and has plants in the waiting room that are actually alive. I remember feeling calm when I walked in. I had taken the day off work. I was wearing her favorite color, a sort of dusty blue she always called proper. And I had brought a small framed photo of the 2 of us at the lake house that I was going to ask if I could keep something from the house to go with it. Daniel was already there when I arrived. He was wearing a suit. He smiled at me, the wide-open smile he uses in professional settings, and kissed me on the cheek. He smelled like the same cologne he'd been wearing for years. Margaret Osei was efficient and kind. She explained that we would be reviewing the will as filed, that there were a few small bequests to a local hospice and the library foundation Nana Ruth had volunteered with, and then the remainder of the estate, the investment account, now sitting at roughly $340. 000 after fees. And the house in Oakville, assessed at approximately $680. 000 would be distributed as written. Then she opened the folder, and she read from a document that I had never seen before. According to the will, Margaret was reading. Nana Ruth had amended her estate in September of this year, just 6 weeks before she died. While she was in hospice care and on a medication regimen that made her sleep for most of the day, to leave the house and the full investment account to Daniel. I was named for a single bequest, $10. 000, and a list of personal items. I sat very still. Daniel was looking at the table. Margaret paused, looked up at both of us, and said carefully that she was obligated to inform us that a codicil had been submitted to her office in late September, amending the original will she had on file, and that it had been submitted with a signed letter of instruction and a notarized signature. She said she had processed it as received. I asked her, in a voice that I was very focused on keeping level, if I could see the document. She slid it across the table. I read it once. Then I looked at Daniel. He was studying a point on the wall somewhere above Margaret's shoulder. Daniel, I said. He said, Claire. I know this is hard. When did you get this drawn up? He said he didn't know what I was talking about. He said Nana Ruth had told him months ago that she wanted to change things. He said she had been worried about his finances, that she had talked to him in the summer about wanting to help. He said it with the practiced steadiness of someone who had rehearsed it. But his jaw was tight in the way it gets when he's lying, which I know because I have watched him lie since we were children. I looked at the signature on the codicil. I know my grandmother's handwriting. I have cards from her going back 20 years. I know the way she formed her capital R. Slightly looped. Leaning right. I know the way she crossed her T's. A quick flat stroke. I know the way arthritis had changed her grip in the last 3 years, making her letters more compressed, less fluid. The signature on the codicil was careful. It was close. It was the work of someone who had studied her writing. But the pressure was wrong. The baseline drift was wrong. And the codicil had been notarized by a notary whose address I didn't recognize. In a strip mall in Mississauga, I had never heard Nana Ruth mention. I folded my hands on the table. Margaret, I said, I'd like to formally contest this document. I'm a forensic document examiner with the federal government. I have reason to believe this codicil is not authentic, and I would like a certified copy of it today, along with the contact information for the notary who witnessed it. The silence in that office was extraordinary. Daniel said my name. Ons. Sharply. A warning tone. I looked at him and said nothing. Here is what Daniel did not know. 3 weeks earlier, I had driven to Oakville on a Saturday. I had gone to the house and sat with Nana Ruth on her good afternoon. When the medication had worn down enough that she was clear and present and entirely herself, we had tea. We looked at photographs. And then I had asked her, gently, whether she had made any changes to her will recently. I told her I wasn't asking because of the money. I told her I was asking because I knew Daniel had been in financial trouble. And I knew he had visited her twice in the last month. And I wanted to make sure she hadn't felt pressured into anything. She looked at me for a long moment, with those very clear gray eyes she had. And she said, I haven't changed a thing. Claire, I want things the way they are. Daniel knows that. Then she took my hand, both of hers around mine. Cold, as always. And she said, I already talked to Margaret. Whatever I decide is in writing, and I've told her I don't want any amendments unless I call her myself. From my own phone, I had nodded. I had hugged her. And before I left, I had asked one more thing. I had asked if she would be willing to let me take a video of her. Just a short one. Just of us talking about the family. For the memories. She laughed and said I was being sentimental. I said yes. I am. That video was 47 minutes long. In it, my grandmother is clear, lucid, and completely herself. She talks about her will. She talks about what she wants. She says, on camera, with a date and time stamp, that she has made no amendments and does not intend to. She says Daniel knows her wishes. She says she loves us both and wants us to be fair to each other after she's gone. I had that video. I had sent a copy to my own encrypted work server 3 weeks ago. I also had the name of the notary on the codicil. A man named Paul Sherritt, who, when I looked him up the night after the will reading, had a registered notary number that had expired in 2019 and a business address that turned out to be a UPS store. I had contacted a senior colleague at the RCMP Integrated Proceeds of Crime Unit 4 days before the will reading. Not to report yet. Just to describe a hypothetical. Just to understand what the process would look like if I needed to move quickly. I had not told Daniel any of this. I had sat at that table in Margaret Osei's office, and I had let him read from a document he had paid someone to forge. In front of a witness. In a formal, legal proceeding. And I had asked for a certified copy so that the fraudulent document would be officially entered into a chain of evidence. Because I know what I do for a living. The weeks that followed were not simple. And I want to be honest about that. Daniel called me 6 times the evening after the will reading. I did not answer. He texted things that started as explanations and became accusations, and then became something close to pleading. He said Nana Ruth had wanted this. He said I didn't understand how difficult things had been for him. He said I was being vindictive. He said if I'd really loved her, I'd understand she wanted to take care of her family. I read every message. I saved every message. I forwarded every message to the file. My colleague at the RCMP connected me with an investigator in the Financial Crimes Unit in Toronto. I submitted the codicil. The video. Nana Ruth's original will, as Margaret had it on file. 3 years' worth of Nana Ruth's handwriting samples I had collected from cards and letters. And the notary records, showing Paul Sherritt's license, had lapsed 5 years prior. The examination took 11 weeks. I did not perform it myself, conflict of interest, but I knew the examiner they assigned, and I knew she was good. The findings were unambiguous. The signature on the codicil was not Ruth's. The notarization was fraudulent. The document had been produced by someone with access to her personal information and a sample of her handwriting, and submitted to Margaret's office by courier with a cover letter that had also been forged. Daniel was charged in February. Estate fraude, uttering a forged document, and obstruction. His lawyer entered a not guilty plea and then, 6 weeks later, changed it. Paul Sherritt, the man who had sold his notary credentials and his stamp for what turned out to be $2,000, cooperated with the investigation in exchange for reduced charges. He confirmed that Daniel had approached him through a mutual contact and paid him in cash. The estate was administered according to the original will. I did not go to Daniel's sentencing hearing. My mother called me and asked me to write a letter asking for leniency. I told her I wasn't able to do that. She said I was tearing the family apart. I told her Daniel had done that. And I'd simply been the one paying close enough attention to notice. She didn't call for a while after that. I went back to Oakville in the spring. After probate cleared and the house was being prepared for sale, as the estate required, I walked through every room. The kitchen still smelled like her. Something warm and specific that I can't describe and don't want to. I took the things I had been left. The framed photos, a quilt she made when I was born, the little blue bowl she kept on the kitchen counter that she always put car keys and mail and spare change in, that had been in the same spot for as long as I could remember. I stood in the living room for a long time before I left. I think about her hands. Cold in August. Cold in every season. Really. Pressing against my face. And the laugh she gave when I made a face back at her. She told me once, when I was maybe 12 and going through something difficult at school, that the most important thing a person could do was pay attention. She said most harm came from people not paying attention to what was happening around them, to what people were showing them, to what they actually knew versus what they wished were true. I paid attention. Nana, that's all I did. I want to be careful about how I end this, because I don't want to give the impression that justice felt the way I thought it would. Daniel was sentenced to 14 months, to be served in the community under a conditional sentence order with full restitution to the estate. His real estate license is under review. The watch and the truck are gone, and I have my grandmother's quilt and her blue bowl and 47 minutes of video where she is completely herself and completely present and telling me in her own words that she loves her family and wants things to be fair. I watch it sometimes, not often, but sometimes. The maple in her front yard had gone red the day she died. I think about that too. Everything showing exactly what it was before it let go. She was right about autumn.